let's go. Welcome back, folks. At Podlatcha, we're here. We're recording this Sunday, July 7th, right after Independence Day. Could it be the last Independence Day? I don't know. We'll see. TBD. I celebrated it by bleak shit, man. We're in a bleak shit.
Just the most fear-mongering thing.
We need somebody that's just going to take it to the extreme here. All right? And
Will
that's
Smith.
me.
Well, we need Will Smith.
We do, but he's busy bitch slapping Chris Rock, so we're going to have to find somebody else.
He really is.
Have I explained the gator situation to you at my place?
Tell me.
Well, we just moved to a new place. I got this townhouse, and it's right on the end of the unit, and it's next to a pond, and there is a baby gator that lives there.
Okay.
And we're in this situation where we're not trying to be narcs, because, like, they all know about the gator, but, like, this gator's getting really close to our back porch. Like, the other day, he was within, like, 5 feet of it, and my cat sometimes gets out, and I walk the dog back there. And so I'm like, I'm all about wildlife. I'm into it. I like having a gator as a neighbor. His name is Cranky. He's little. He's probably about 5 feet long. But at some point, I'm going to have to be a narc and call the DNR because it's going to start becoming a problem.
1,000%, yeah.
Because they don't stay babies. They become big-ass motherfucking gators.
But if you narc on them, does a gang of gators show up at your door?
Don't know. I don't know where the mom is. I don't know if there's, like...
Well, because you kind of get them locked up. I mean...
Yeah, no, and this is something that I'm starting to learn, having lived in Florida. I don't know. I don't know what the rules are. Also, they can't do anything with the gator until it reaches a certain size from some regulatory. I don't really understand it. That's what the person at the apartment complex told me. So they might be full of shit. I don't know.
It's just Florida, so the statute says, until that thing's a big motherfucker, we ain't touching it.
Until it's, quote, bigger than hell.
Bigger than hell, we ain't touching.
Yeah, that's an exact measurement in Florida.
It's actually 67-7-2.
Yep, the Florida Municipal Code. You know
Florida
it, baby.
Florida Code. I know it to a T.
Yeah, well, it was in your bar exam.
That's something, dude. That is, it was. It actually was question 1. I remember it because I missed it. You know what's crazy though? I have gators as my neighbors too, but they're not actually gators. They're just fish that have taken in so much of whatever DuPont has put in our rivers that they've morphed into gators or gator-looking things, and that is the Ohio River. Have you ever fished there?
I'm intimately familiar with the Ohio River. The only thing I've ever caught there is a gar, and if anybody knows what a gar is, it would not be surprising that emerging from the Ohio River.
Well, I'm just talking. These things have gone from small trout to things that have 10 eyes. So whatever's in the Ohio River, I think could defeat the gators. So if you want, come up here, fish in the Ohio, catch a couple fish that have got so much lead and, I mean, what else?
Teflon, I don't know.
Oh my God, Teflon fish, dude, tougher than nails.
Slip right through your hands, non-stick.
Slip right through your hands. Those things actually, they swim into the gator's mouth and then they swim out their tail. Like, that's how they destroy them. It's crazy.
I support this idea in theory, but the whole invasive species thing, I don't want to take something from the Ohio River habitat and introduce it into this fucking wild-ass state. Because, people run around here with bath salts, and they haven't even been in the Ohio River. So I think, butterfly effect, all things being equal, too dangerous. Speaking of dirty rivers, this is actually a really funny story. There's nothing to do with Appalachia, but that's okay. So I was reading about how in France they're going to host the Olympics, and I guess they're going to do some of the swimming events in the River Seine, but it's
I saw that.
Historically like a dirty as fuck river, so the government spent like billions of dollars to clean it up. Well, people were pissed that they were spending that money in it, so they the French people have organized this effort to take shits in the river, and they're dump. I'm not making this up. They're dump your shit in the river to as a fuck you to the French government, because they're we're going to pay up billions of dollars to clean this river, when they're oh, so you're doing this for the Olympics? You could put that towards housing, or, just clean the fucking river and not have the Olympics here. Yeah, hundreds of Parisians
Okay.
plan to poop in the Seine to protest
Oh,
the Olympics. God, that's so awesome. Good for them. You know what? I find it very inspiring.
though, okay, I'll play devil's advocate here. Okay. Here's
Gonna
what
have
I
our
will say.
Parisian listeners up your ass, but okay.
That's okay. Please do. Well, to be fair, if they're up mine, that means I can't throw anything in
No,
the
that
river.
means you'll be,
So
well,
fine.
that's true. If you were up theirs, then you'd be going in the river.
Yep. Right, exactly, and I'm not. I will say, in some sense, if part of the goal was to get the river clean, like these people who are protesting it, why would you purposely go back and make it dirty?
Well, I think it's not, the goal is not necessarily at that point to make it clean. It's to punish the government.
No, I get that. Yeah, I mean, I get their point, but like, it seems counterintuitive.
I think let me back up. I don't believe that this is on kidsnews.com. That's fucking hilarious.
Wow. It actually goes CNN, Kids News, Fox. That's actually how I get my news.
I get all my news from Kids News because it tells me if it's okay for little eyes. I think that like it's more of a protest of just they're spending money on this rather than other things. And
okay.
I think. I mean,
okay.
Parisians back me up here. I don't know. I could be wrong.
I'm like, I always, and it doesn't matter like where it is. I'm always like a little turned off by that in the sense of like, we can be like really mad and do protests and stuff, but like if your group's initiative was, it would be like, well, I don't know. It just seems counterintuitive at times. Like, go do something else. Like, do something that's really gonna affect them, not like take you back to what
it does kind of make what the government's doing counterproductive because they're like, we're paying it to clean it up, and they're like, oops, we're just gonna take a massive en masse shit in it to say fuck you for doing this. Which honestly, like, if you could find a way to do that with other government expenditures, I mean, look, I don't know how you would do that here. I mean, you can't really take a shit on bombs that go to Ukraine and Israel. Maybe you could, but I think they'd still launch them. Perhaps with you on them. I don't know. Our military is ruthless as fuck and scary.
Yeah,
it'll drone strike my ass just for saying this, so I better shut up.
See you, buddy.
We had a good run. What's this, 218 episodes?
Good run, dude.
All right, we've got a great show today. We're going to be talking about the recent bankruptcy settlement that the Sacklers of Purdue Pharma infamy entered into and how it was invalidated by the Supreme Court. Whether or not that's a good thing, because I think it's actually a little bit more complicated than what people might think. This is going to be a little fact-heavy, a little detail-heavy, so please bear with us, but it will be important. And I think that it's important to parse this down a little bit, especially you, John, you're a lawyer. I have a legal background, so we understand this a little bit better maybe than the layperson. So recently, recently as in this past, I think, week or two, the Supreme Court, in a slurry of shitty opinions, issued one that was not as shitty, in fact, might be good. We're going to talk about it. Basically invalidating a bankruptcy settlement between Purdue Pharma, which was the company that created and manufactured OxyContin. That settlement shielded the Sackler family who owned Purdue Pharma, shielded them from individual liability for the opioid crisis in exchange for a bunch of money, which we'll get into. Invalidated that bankruptcy settlement, so now they can be held liable. That's sort of the headline takeaway, but it's a little bit more complicated than that.
Yeah, solid point. Let's get into it. I don't want to harp on it. And in terms of, I know I'm going to talk enough. So let's jump in.
Okay.
Get this convo rolling.
So a little bit of background first. I want to talk about the actual bankruptcy settlement because it's important. So as I mentioned, Purdue Pharma, the manufacturer of OxyContin, they filed for bankruptcy in 2019, and this was sort of at the culmination of the opioid crisis. There's thousands of lawsuits alleging that OxyContin helped kickstart the opioid epidemic. You don't file for bankruptcy if you don't have a reason to do it, which is they're extremely culpable. Sure. In this case, not legally speaking, so to speak, but really technically they kind of are. Anyway, we get the point. They did some really fucked up shit, and they lost their company because of it. So it took, like, from my understanding, 2 years to really hash this bankruptcy settlement out. So they have filed for it 2019. They finalized it 2021. We're talking a company with billions in assets, so highly complex. Basically, this is like the settlement. So Purdue Pharma was dissolved. That company no longer exists. The settlement itself largely absolved the Sackler family, who owns Purdue Pharma, or owned, of opioid-related liability. In exchange for that protection from liability, the Sackler family agreed to turn over $6 billion, which this number is different depending on what source you look at. I think most of the sources I found said around 6. I saw anywhere from 4 to 10 billion. I think 6 is probably what it would be. So anyway, in exchange for protection from liability, the Sacklers agreed to turn over $6 billion, including federal settlement fees, paid in installment payments. The payments and the profits of the new drug company built out of Purdue, which I'll get into in a second, were to go to addiction treatment and prevention programs across the country. So you have this huge pot of money that came out of this settlement to go to victims that will help people in recovery, that will fund programs to help prevent substance use disorder, all that kind of stuff. So some sort of compensation to the victims in a way. That's sort of the part where it gets a little complicated, because this is a good thing that this money is being released to ostensibly good things. And I assume through bankruptcy court, had this settlement not been invalidated, they would have ensured by law that it does go to those things. That's why there's a little bit of complication to this, because now that this settlement has been invalidated, which I'll get into in a second, this all has to start all over again. The problem with all of this is, like, Purdue Pharma, or actually, let me not call it that. The Sackler family was supportive of this bankruptcy settlement ultimately because it shielded them from liability. Because you got to think, like, this company, they filed for bankruptcy and everything. Like, they're in a shitty position, but this family still has billions of dollars. They still have a lot of power. And this is sort of like, this is what became of all of that. This meant that they were shielded from liability, and so a full accounting of their role in the epidemic, if this settlement had stayed in place, would not have happened. Shielded from liability, there's no discovery, no fully litigating this in court, meaning they were probably doing this also to try to protect their reputation as well as protect their liability, what reputation they have left, which is not much, to be honest. This settlement, though, and John, I didn't know about this, did not preclude criminal prosecution, but realistically, and this isn't from me, it's from prosecutors, they said that it would be very difficult to try to prosecute a criminal case against the Sacklers, just because it's extremely difficult to establish that causal link, like that criminal link between what actually happened to the opioid crisis and the Sacklers themselves and Purdue Pharma themselves. It's just hard to establish a link that could be proven in a court of law. Like, we know, just practically speaking, that it exists, but I don't know that you could really find a prosecutor that would be able or willing to take this up. I'm not sure. That's my understanding of it. You work in the criminal field. I don't know if you have any thoughts on this, though.
Yeah, I mean, it would be impossible. It would be to the point where, because it's going to be the same thing that, let's go back real quick. We had on here not too long ago, Stephen New, right? He talked about how, and this is a little different, but kind of the same where I'm going. He talked about how he represented babies, infants, in the opioid epidemic, right? But it had gotten thrown out by a federal judge because they were having issues showing the causal link between the two. Because it wasn't the baby taking this medication or this drug, it was the parent. The parent should be the, quote, alleged victim in this case. That's the same thing you're going to see here. It's going to be the argument that there's no causal link between the people who ran Purdue Pharmaceuticals and death. What they're going to say is, yes, they were civilly liable, but criminal liability is way tougher to show that is actually the causal link. Now, if you had maybe a lesser charge, like if you could find some type of fraud, that could be a way that you could do it. If there's actually a good discussion on, and something I do think they could be held criminally liable for is I don't think the opioid epidemic in general, but again, something Stephen Pinu talked about, where Purdue Pharmaceuticals and these other companies purposely lied about things like OxyContin, and they said things like, this will not affect a baby. That you could hold them criminally liable on. That's my opinion.
Misrepresented what it could, how addictive it was, I believe is another claim.
And new. So in my opinion, that's fraud. And I think that could be proven, especially through, subpoenaing documents and stuff like that. But let's take it one step further, Chuck. What the real problem is going to be is the Sackler family is not known as being
billionaire big pharma peddlers. Hell no, they're some of the honest people in the game, son.
So you can't, right. So you can't tell me that they didn't come on, they destroyed documents. That's my guess, right? I don't know. I shouldn't say they did.
Come on,
It would not surprise me, is all I'm saying.
Certainly not be shocking.
No one has any. Yeah, so who knows what they'd really find in an investigation? I think what really happened was prosecutors looked at the settlement and said, at least people are getting something, and that was it. That was the end of it, and they didn't want to wrap up the court's time and all of that. Is that morally the correct decision? I don't know, but I do understand their point of view on this.
Yeah, the law is tough with stuff because, the other thing they could say is well, why are we being held criminally liable? It's really the doctor's fault. The doctors that prescribe these pills, we just simply made them. It's kind of like you can OD on Tylenol, but are you going to fault the manufacturer of Tylenol for it? I am not taking the Sackler side. I'm saying that is the argument they would present, and it's very hard to make that criminally, causal link. And it's a good thing in theory for our criminal justice system that is harder to prove, but unfortunately companies like this get off easy because of that.
Now, let's look at the counterpoint of this. Legally speaking, there are statutes, including the state of West Virginia, where a person can be charged, their charge can be upgraded, if they dealt drugs that ended in death. So if you sold drugs and then that person then dies, you are upgraded in terms of what statute you're punished under.
That is interesting. It's almost like a felony murder rolling away.
In a sense, it is, yeah. So essentially it's an intent to distribute with death, or a distributing with death, or whatever. But those are things that exist already. So the question then becomes, why doesn't something like that exist for billionaire drug dealers?
Yeah, for because so I guess if I were Purdue in that situation, I would say the drug dealer is still the doctor. If you were to apply this fact pattern to that, but I think that there has to be something in place to where this can't happen again. Right. Yeah. The Sacklers, Purdue, they overplayed their hand big time, but there's lots of companies out there that are going to look at this and say, okay, we need to not go so aggressively on whatever we're marketing to where we're not causing a fucking opioid crisis, but we're still, skirting stuff off the top and making a huge payday, and that's how they're going to do it. And there has to be some guardrails that go against companies, not just individuals, and that's, I don't know. Maybe those exist and I'm not aware of them, but right now, the fact that Purdue could even do this for so long tells me that there's something wrong with the system.
Yeah. I mean, and it's just that simple. Like, I think the way, if you want to hold these people actually criminally I keep saying reliable. I'm so tired. Criminally liable.
They were very criminally reliable in that.
Yeah, they are. They always are criminal. They, I think probably could be at least charged with some type of fraud. And I'm assuming it'd be a multi-state, so it'd probably be a federal case.
Yeah, and that might be happening right now too. I'm not sure.
Who knows? Yeah, we don't know what's actually happening. But
this is just bankruptcy that we're talking about. They've got hundreds of lawsuits going against them.
Yeah, I mean, it's just one of those things. I would assume that they're going to, before anything ever happens, they're going to look at what the settlement actually becomes, because believe it or not, like, these things are taken into account when it comes to, criminal cases. That's seen all the time. And I think that they're going to look at that type of stuff. And they have to look at the realistic part of it too, Chuck. Like, I always say, like, prosecutors are they have a lot of support from the state, obviously. They are the state. But they don't have unlimited amount of money. So, like, their
you only have resources that the state gives you.
Yeah, so like their investigation is limited as well. Like, we have to be real about that. Now, do they have the upper hand on normal everyday people? For sure. But in terms of going up against the Sacklers, that's tough, right?
Yeah,
like, that's not the same. That's not the same.
$1 billion company or $1 billion family, they can afford to hire more lawyers than the DOJ has, for sure. Yeah,
and they just have the resources. They could paper them to death. I mean, that's really what it is.
Yeah,
that's what they do in civil case. Go back and look at the civil file on those cases. It's insane how big those cases are.
Yeah, we'll get into that in just a second. I want to finish out like what the settlement looked like, and then talk about like how they invalidated it. Because then there's a great discussion about what the best thing is for the victims. So the last thing about the settlement itself that no longer exists, but it's important to know. Under the agreement, Purdue Pharma ceases to exist. It creates a new company called NOA Pharma, K-N-O-A, and I think that's how it's pronounced. It would be created in its place. NOA would distribute opioid addiction treatments and overdose reversal medicines like Narcan while continuing to produce opioids, which that's an interesting part of the settlement. I don't know about that, but
wow.
Yeah, it's kind of fucked up because you're both doing harm reduction and also potentially creating harm. Not really sure what the rationale was there.
So wait, hold on. Let's go back for a second because I want to make sure I understood you right. They were able to form a new entity and still sell opioids?
I think that the terms of the bankruptcy agreement basically had it so that that this company would form and do like the harm reduction, but also be producing opioids so as not to have a disruption in, I guess, the supply chain of opioid production, wow. Which, to be clear, opioids do still serve a very important purpose in our society and in pain management. Sure. So in that sense, I get it, but I don't know the details specific to this, but it does seem kind of like you're putting the fox back in the hen house and just kind of putting a muzzle on the fox, but not really doing much there. I don't know.
Wow. That's incredible. You know what? Let's keep going because I'm sure I'll have more opinions.
Oh, it'll get worse. Don't worry. So yeah. I wanted to know how this was actually supposed to get paid out, right? You have all this money. How is it supposed to go? So Purdue was supposed to make initial payments of roughly $500 million, additional funds coming from the anticipated profits from the new company. States would get money from a national opioid abatement trust, from which they would then distribute that to local governments, Native American tribes, et cetera. And then another fund would compensate the over 130,000 victims and families who suffered from addiction or died from an overdose, and the amount ranging from $3,500 to $48,000 per individual. So that was sort of like how the money was supposed to break down. One thing that I found very interesting when I was looking into this, it was like my thoughts were like, okay, what were the reactions initially when this came out? Like, was it enough? One of the judges, I think, in the case, it might have been the judge or somebody, an advocate for the victims, had said that they were upset that the settlement was so small. One of the reasons it was because the Sackler family has a lot of their money parked in offshore accounts, and because this was bankruptcy court, that money could not be touched. And I don't know a lot about bankruptcy law, but my understanding is U.S. bankruptcy law can't touch foreign assets.
They don't have jurisdiction.
And that is a little window into the rich world here. That's one of the reasons why rich people like Mitt Romney and whoever the hell else, I don't know why Mitt Romney is the first one that came to my mind, but rich people put their money in.
That is a weird one.
I don't know why. It's like he's sort of like one of the not as bad rich people now. Maybe, who knows?
Yeah, like he's actually taken a turn.
Yeah, he's got some morals.
Not on everything.
Anyway,
on
I mean, anybody that was mentioned in the Panama Papers, anytime you hear somebody that has a bank account in the Cayman Islands, that's what it is. So they have a bunch of money that couldn't be touched by the bankruptcy court, which is unfortunate. A majority of states and our plaintiffs supported the bankruptcy plan reasoning because they felt it was the best way to help compensate the victims. Some economists have estimated that the cost of the opioid epidemic, including law enforcement treatment, social service, could actually be in the trillions, so this is barely like a drop in the bucket. And then this was, I think, really summed it up for me with what this person said. Ryan Hampton, he was the co-chair of a watchdog committee for the plaintiffs, so the victims. He said that this is a take it or leave it settlement. So like either get this or nothing. And that was my interpretation of it at the time, was like, if you want the victims to get something out of this, you take this or you leave it, because this company is powerful and this is the best we could do. At the time, though, and then I will stop talking. We'll actually start getting into what happened with Supreme Court. I know this is a lot of details, but it's important. 9 states objected to the plan at the time, arguing that the shields for the family would prevent them from exercising their police power to prosecute the Sacklers for violating civil laws, which, again, on consumer protection statutes, I felt like that was a fair argument. And then Purdue's bankruptcy restructuring attorney, for what it's worth, said that it was a good thing this came through and that the objections were harmful to the victims. So fuck this guy.
Wow.
It really just tells me, like, okay, Purdue was really pushing for this, so that tells you that it wasn't as good as it could have been. That's all the background that you need to know about the actual bankruptcy settlement. Yeah.
And one last thing, Chuck. Like, when people think about these settlements too, they basically look at the dollar amount and they say, well, that's enough or that's not enough, which I guess makes sense. But you also have to look at things in the sense of, there are a lot of things that can go wrong for either side when it comes to a trial or any type of administrative ruling or some type of motion filing that was missed. There's a lot of stuff that can go wrong. So you start weighing that, plus you start to weigh like attorney's cost, things like that, especially if you're on the victim's side. So there's a reason why they obviously chose, to do this settlement. And I think that sometimes we forget about that in terms of just looking at the dollar amount.
Yeah, it's never going to be enough, because you're never going to be able to bring back the people that were
No.
lost.
That's how
and
it is.
especially when you're battling a billion-dollar company, even if they're the most culpable that they could possibly be, they still hold the power, and that's part of the problem. Now, Supreme Court, like I mentioned, invalidated this. They came down to a very nuanced look at federal bankruptcy code, whether it permits agreements of this type. It was kind of an interesting deciding line. They rejected the settlement plan on a 5-4 line. They basically said, the majority said, that the bankruptcy court did not have the authority to release the Sackler family members from legal claims made by opioid victims. So basically, they said that you can't shield them from liability through a bankruptcy settlement. And that was the majority. That was Gorsuch, Ketanji Brown Jackson, Amy Coney Barrett, Clarence Thomas, Samuel Alito. So 4 conservative justices, one quote unquote liberal. So four Republican appointed, 1 Democrat appointed. The majority claimed that the Sacklers could have declared bankruptcy, but instead decided to piggyback off the company's own bankruptcy proceedings to resolve pending legal claims, thereby obtaining all of it without the consent of those affected and placing anything approaching their total assets on the table for the creditors. So basically what they're saying is, instead of the individual Sacklers declaring bankruptcy, they said, well, we'll just do it through the company. That'll shield us, and that'll look like we're doing the right thing, which is fair, that's exactly what they did, and it was really shitty because you basically shielded yourself through your company and used it as its own shield, which, I mean, not surprising they did that. So Gorsuch said he acknowledged that the decision Thursday may cause Purdue's current reorganization plan to unravel. He said that the outcome would considerably increase legal exposure to the Sacklers and may force the family to negotiate better terms. And he claimed that if past this prologue, there may be a better deal on the horizon, implying that this has happened to a smaller extent in the past. I wanted to mention, though, what Justice Kavanaugh said. I love beer, Brett. He was in the minority. He loves beer, and he's a piece of shit, but he did have I think, a legitimate point, although it's not really grounded in, like, a legal argument. His claim was that the decision was wrong on the law. He didn't really expand on that much, at least not that I read, but he said it would be devastating to more than 100,000 opioid victims and their families. As a result of the ruling, opioid victims are now deprived of the substantial monetary recovery that they long fought for and finally secured after years of litigation, which is 100% true. And one thing I wanted to discuss after I read this reaction from Purdue. Purdue did not like the ruling, which tells you something that maybe we should look more into it. It might be a good thing. They said, their spokesperson, they said, today's ruling is heart-crushing because it invalidates a settlement supported by nearly all of our creditors, including states, local governments, personal injury victims, schools, and hospitals that would have delivered billions of dollars for victim compensation, opioid crisis abatement, et cetera, et cetera. Critically, the ruling is limited to the narrow legal issue regarding the scope of third-party release conferred by the plan, yada, yada. We don't have to go into that. Basically, they don't like this, obviously, because it opens the family up to legal liability individually, and so there's something to be said about that. I have to be honest with you. I don't know how I feel about this because I am worried that it's going to be a long time before any victims have any form of compensation, and this does put a degree of uncertainty as to, like, whether or not there will be a settlement that even reaches this level of compensation to victims. I don't know. It could be the case that a settlement is reached where it's even better than this, and the Sacklers are individually impugned and forced to, divulge some of their assets to compensate victims and to, pay the legal price of doing this. But I don't know. I think it's putting up a lot of uncertainties into the legal system, which worries me. And I just feel like this family has so many resources that they might be able to weasel their way out of this. So while I think it's good that this opens them up to liability, I'm very concerned that we're not going to be able to get as good of a settlement.
Solid point there. The other thing to think about too is we don't know what the future holds on their financial status. That's something to think about too.
What do you mean?
Will there be $6 billion by the end of it?
Oh, that's a good point. Like, will that money even still exist?
Yeah, will it be there? I mean, think about this. Like, the amount of money that's going to go into legal fees. A lot of people, when it comes to bankruptcy, it's we learn in law school, right? It's the get in line method. All the creditors get in line. All the people want their money. Everybody wants all this stuff. So my question then becomes, does that money sit in a trust to the side, or does that money go to the pot and it starts dwindling down? That's worrisome to me, because if you look at the net worth of the Sacklers, it's like $11 billion. Like, they have a lot of money, but $6 billion is a lot of money.
That's the only money that the bankruptcy court could get a hold of.
Right. So it becomes, we're at that point now. It's like, will that money exist?
Yeah.
Will these people, yeah, let's say, Chuck, they say, you know what? It's actually, they go to trial, whatever. Court finds, or the jury finds, or whoever finds that they actually owe $20 billion. They don't have $20 billion, so it doesn't matter.
It's kind of like O.J. Simpson when being civilly liable for Ronald Goldman's death and Nicole Brown Simpson's death. Like, yeah, I mean, you can say that he owes X amount of dollars, but dude was broke, so yeah.
Yeah, it's the same thing.
Not saying it's not a good thing.
And you see, No, I get it. But like you see this a lot in huge civil trials. You see where a jury comes back and they say you owe the victim $300 million. And that person goes, "Well, guess what? I ain't got fucking $300 million. So, what are you going to do?" And so and then what happens after that? The two sides come to an agreement.
Mm-hmm.
Even afterwards. So it's like will this just be an issue that we see hurt those people? It's a real possibility that that's the case. It really is.
And that's what I'm concerned most about. The problem is like this settlement initially was, I mean, it sucked because that whole reason that they were able to get this much money out of them is because they were shielded from liability. Now, I have no idea what kind of backroom dick sucking they did in order to get that kind of deal. And it honestly pisses me off that that's the best that we could get from them. And at the outset, it's really shitty. And I'm hoping that something similar can be replicated where that liability shield is not included. But I'm just worried that it's not going to be able to. And like you said, I mean, there could be a world where they take those assets and do something with them to where they can liquidate them and they can no longer be accessed by the bankruptcy court. I hope that there's guardrails in place where that can't happen, but you just don't know with this kind of stuff. And look, just never put it past billionaires to be able to weasel their way out of being accountable, because that's what this is. And they did it once with this, and it wouldn't shock me if they did it again. I would be, what I'm most interested in hearing is from the victims, from those individuals, there's 130,000 some odd families and individuals that they mentioned in the settlement. I want to know how they feel about this, because those are the people that ultimately matter the most.
Yeah, like who cares what you and I think, right? Like who cares? And it's just those are the people that are actually affected by it. But the other thing that's, I guess, an issue too, which I don't know how people feel about this, like that money also was going to go to continue treatment options, like to help fund treatment options. Does that get put on hold now? Now, I will say, I have felt
it does. I mean,
I'm sorry. I mean the projects in general. Like let's say a project was like, hey, we're actually, we're in on this, and we were we were going to get $3 million to do it, right? Does that project then stop, or does someone step in and help? I guess that was my point there. Was I know that the funding, their funding there will get held, but I was just meaning, like, is it going to stop that progress? My opinion on that is no. I don't think that that's going to happen. I think the federal and state governments have done a lot in terms of funding those things. I think places like Parkersburg are a good example of that. There are umpteen like rehab facilities here, which is a good thing, but there are a lot. So it's like, it's one of those things where I don't think that that's going to be the problem. The problem really is making this, so everyone knows this is a legal term. I'm not meaning this literally, but making those families whole again, like that's the legal term. So don't think I'm being an asshole by saying that, because obviously you can't bring those people back, that were lost, but that's the legal term, is making them whole.
To the extent the law can provide, yeah. And that's, I think, the question right now. And again, it's to me, it's like, it's great that there can be liability individually against Sacklers. They deserve it 100%. I'm worried that this settlement will cease to exist in this form, that it will be diminished if it does exist again. So I don't know. We'll see. I hope that I hope that that's not the case, though. And to be clear, fuck the Sacklers, fuck Purdue Pharma. They should all be in prison and all their money taken away, in my opinion, because they've dealt unimaginable harm to this country and especially this region. But we're dealing with a system where money buys you power. In the legal system, it 100% does, and right now they have a lot more money than these victims.
And that's as a defense attorney, it's very frustrating to see things like this.
It's unjust.
Because I have represented a lot of very good people who, are just in a bad spot and, made a mistake or whatever. The Sacklers are sociopaths who didn't just make a mistake. They literally got rich doing this. Like, this was no mistake. This was a
coordinated plan.
I've got people, in the state of West Virginia, we incarcerate people on a 1 to 10 year sentence for a shoplifting third.
For what?
That's the punish for shoplifting
what does that
third.
Mean, shoplifting third.
Your third, if you shoplift 3 times, it's a felony in West Virginia, and you get a 1 to 10. These people killed hundreds of thousands of people through their product, through what they did, and they're just enjoying the billionaire lifestyle. Like, it's always going to be unjust.
It's unfortunate, and that's why, like, with these settlements, it's like, again, it comes down to, is this the best that you can get out of it? And at the time, that settlement was, according to a lot of people involved. And so, I don't know. I hope that the victims can get some form of compensation from the Sackler families. I hope that some of this money starts to trickle down into some of these programs that are desperately needed more funding. But yeah, I think that this is a lot more complicated than just the headline of the Sackler family is now open to liability, which is a good thing. But I'm glad that we were able to talk about this because it's a lot more complicated than that.
1,000%.
Cool. Well, I think I'm just going to take Datalacha and put it into exclusive because I think this was long enough to where we can do that.
1,000,000,000% agree.
Well, then we can move. I mean, that in and of itself was a beef, but I'm excited for your beef because it's a different type of beef and it's a meaty one. It's kind of like, it's like beef is just cow, right? Technically. Okay,
Yeah,
I'm just making sure. All right. So it's like that was like steak, right? Or like
all right,
a tenderloin. This is a New York strip.
Tenderloin. Okay.
New York
right,
because of Democrats.
Oh,
that was a
good lead in there.
Save,
good lead in there.
If you're bothered by heat, back up out the grill. My boy Big John's finna fix you up a meal. Yeah, you broke the rules, that's a big deal. Got your mouth full, but it don't matter still. Y'all want some beef with Big John, but at the same time, don't you beef with Big John. Trying to be the man, but you sweet when it's time. Open up wide, it'll leave till it's gone. Eat your beef with Big John. Eat your beef with Big John. This is beef with Big John. Y'all got beef with Big John.
I like that. So, look, this is going to go back to something we talked about in the episode before, but I think Democrats, if you're listening, gather around. Get around the campfire. Let's have a little kumbaya.
Fucking yeah, baby.
Let's, and by that, I'm going to steal a line from a doctor who taught English at my high school. And she used to always say, let's have a come to Jesus moment. Did you ever have her? I don't know if you did.
Oh, yeah, I did. I mean, lots of people had told me to have a come to Jesus moment. I think, like...
But that was like the place where I really learned it, like where she was like, the first day she told you like what the come to Jesus moment, like everyone in this class is going to have a come to Jesus moment.
Well, then, yeah, hell yeah. Well, I mean,
which I'd never thought of.
We need a little bit of that.
So we're going to have one today. So Democrats yonder...
Gather around Papa John as he tells you a tale.
Yeah, hear ye, hear ye. Sit down and listen.
Speaks.
We are at a point in politics that I am annoyed every day. Every day.
Low.
But I'm annoyed with different people than I was before. So, back in 2020... I was annoyed with people who were like, MAGA extremists, right? In 2022, I was annoyed mostly by people who just wouldn't take reality as the constant. And in 2024, I find myself being really annoyed by partisan thinkers. And by that I mean people who have become so entrenched in party politics that they've made it their identity. They think it's cool. They think it's cool to think certain ways. And I think that sums up the Democratic Party to a T right now. It's whatever is like hip. That seems to be the Democrats. And right now, the hip thing to do is to say, if you don't back Joe Biden, you're a bad person, especially if you were thinking about voting for him. There's a problem with that. One, it's exactly what we talked about in every election cycle for the Democrats, and that is you cannot be the party of us versus them. They already own that. The Republicans own that one. You ain't getting it. You got to be the party. You got to be the big tent party. Everybody's welcome. The Democrats have forgotten that. They've forgotten that a long time ago, but they forget it every day now. To the point where, and I'm just going to be honest here, Chuck, it's okay to be worried about Joe Biden.
Thank God, because I am very concerned.
It's okay to think he should not be the next president, or he should not have a second term. It's okay to think that, and I think it's fair, and in some ways I think it's healthy to think that. Now, does that mean that I think the other guy should win? No, that's not my point here. My point is that you can look at a man and say, your time has passed. It's time to move on. And I wish the leaders in the Democratic Party would do the same. But let me caveat that. Let me reword it. Would have done the same. Because it's too late now. Biden is the nominee. He will be the nominee. And if things keep going the way he will, he will be a one-term president. That's the reality that we're facing right now. I'm being honest. It is unfair to look at another person and say, your opinion doesn't matter, and two, that this isn't actually a problem. I keep seeing so many times where people say things like, it was one debate. How could that change your mind? No, it wasn't. This isn't about one debate. It's about how we've watched Joe Biden struggle. And look, everyone goes through struggles, right? The president of the United States is held at a different standard. That's just how life is. That's the way this works. Not everybody gets to be president. Not everybody should be president. But if you're going to be president and you're going to get to that point, you're held to a different standard. Sorry, that's life. And you put yourself there. Like, no one told you had to run for president. And Joe Biden's run plenty of times. We knew he wanted to be president. And we're at a point now that unless there is a miraculous turnaround, Joe Biden will lose this election. And yes, it is on Joe Biden, but it's more on the people around him. Because those people, for the last 4 years, have said, you know what, Joe, just keep going. Just keep running. Keep doing what you're doing, right? No one has stepped up, or at least to what we know, has stepped in and said, Joe, you probably shouldn't run for a second term. We're probably at that point that maybe you're not the guy moving forward. It's the same way where I compare it to an NFL quarterback. Let's just talk Brett Favre. Probably a bad choice. He stole a bunch of welfare money.
Brett Favre.
Allegedly. But let's think about all the times Brett Favre retired and came back. He retired and unretired, right? Had somebody actually been talking to Brett and saying, you're washed. It's over. Maybe his legacy would have been less tarnished. But it's not. That's all anybody remembers about Brett Favre right now, is that he retired and unretired. Like, that's his thing. Joe Biden's is maybe he's going to be running for a term too long.
Perhaps. So a couple of things. I think I will play devil's advocate. I still think that there's time to replace him. Technically speaking, it's till the Democratic Convention, which you can. It's tough. I think that there's a legitimate argument. Yeah. First of all, there's a legitimate argument either way. I am of the opinion that you can find a different nominee and they would stand a better chance at winning against Donald Trump, which in my opinion is the most important thing right now, than he does.
Let me ask you a question. What would that nominee have? Because I struggle to get there. So help me out. What would that nominee have to look like? You don't have to tell me a person, but what type of candidate do you think could come
messenger,
overcome
because
it?
because
I think that's
right now, and that is the most important thing when running a campaign. You have to have an effective messenger. That's
okay.
And people are like, he's also just got a bit of a tarnished record because of that, and I think that. I don't know. Yeah. And look, I could be wrong. And if you could put another person in, they could lose. But I think that right now you have to assess all the options because this is not good. And the likelihood of him having another slip up and just looking bad, because perception is reality, very high. And I don't know. I mean, look, and I respect people that disagree with that. I really do, genuinely. And I think that right now, we're in a situation where it merits attention because Donald Trump is a terrifying reality in this country, and him being the president again is a reality that we shouldn't have to face because he's a beatable person. He's a lunatic. He's a fucking unhinged lunatic. And so, but that being said, I agree with you on the fact that people should have come to him earlier. And here's the problem. So many of those people that could have done that were worried about their own prospects and their own careers.
There you go.
Any one of these people
there you go.
Could have been I'm going to run and you're not. Any one of these names have been floated around. You throw them out. Even Whitmer could have said that, Bashir even, although it's a little bit different because he's actually running for second term. But a bunch of people whose names have been floated around now could have done that, but they were worried that was going to alienate them in the Democratic Party. And truthfully, they probably had a good argument for that. But you have to think less about yourself and what's more important for the good of the country. And objectively, Donald Trump is terrible for the good of the country. And if you think that that's the case, then there's a lot of people that felt that way and didn't say anything. Guaranteed. So I'm with you 100%. And it's this dynamic of how does this affect me that really screwed a bunch of people up, in my opinion.
Yeah, but that's Paul. I mean, that's where we're at now. And I here's the funny part about it, Chuck. I actually think the people who say things like, "How could you question Joe Biden? How you doing this is obviously bad for your country." I think those are the same types of people. I don't think they actually 100% believe the shit that they're saying. I think that they think it's the best for themselves.
Yeah, well, there's some people that genuinely think that. I think but they're not politicians. But yeah, I do think that they're a lot of if they're an elected official, they're calculating what their political future looks like with every a lot of the people that spoke out, especially initially. Lloyd Doggett's 77. He's a Democratic representative from Austin. He's 77. He doesn't need to worry about his political future. There's another person, similar situation. I think that's. And it was honestly, it was one of the same reasons that Joe Biden didn't run in 2016 when Hillary Clinton did, because everybody was saying, "No, Joe, don't run," and it's Hillary's turn.
That's literally that's why I think that in 2020, people can call me nuts. I still think that's why so many people dropped out so quickly in the presidential race against Joe. That's what the Democrats have done historically. It's this guy is the next in line, and he will be that he's going to be the guy. And I say he because we know that that's obviously what the push has been. Unfortunately, Hillary, they pushed Hillary. At times, she was her worst own enemy.
Yeah, and there's something to be said about loyalty, like coalescing around a candidate and backing them. And that's smart because you build coalitions in order to do that, but that doesn't mean fealty. And that's the distinction.
A good point. You can be loyal and real. You can be loyal and real.
Look,
and that's what I think people are forgetting.
Yeah,
they think that
I live in a
loyalty
swing
is
state.
end-all,
All right,
be-all.
Some people argue it's not anymore, but I do. Florida, it can be a swing state.
Sure.
Try hard enough, and that's.
I live in a
sure.
swing state too. Door swings
open for
to let 'em
Republicans
in.
and slams right in the Democrats' face.
Swings closed for Dems.
So whoever the fuck's name is on the ballot for D and president, and this November, I'm voting for. Doesn't fucking matter if it's the corpse of Joe Biden or a spry, young-looking Joe Biden or Kamala Harris or who the fuck ever gives a fuck knows. I'm voting for whoever that is. But I think that it would behoove the future of this country if we entertain the idea that somebody else might be better suited for the job, and that job is not just being president, it's winning a presidential campaign. And right now, Joe Biden doesn't look like he can win a presidential campaign.
No, and guess what? That's okay to say. Now, Joe may take a turn and start soaring like he did in 2020. On this podcast, I'm very open, and I think it's hilarious that we were so wrong in terms of Joe Biden winning. I will stand behind my personal belief that I still didn't think that he was the right person to win. That's just my belief, and that's I'm allowed to have an opinion. Come for me, I don't care. I've had worse opinions before, and I've had more. I've had bigger pitchforks. So it's one of those things where we're at a point now that I firmly believe that this presidential race will determine the future of the Democratic Party. That's my opinion.
Very well could. And I agree.
Do you have a name in mind that you would want to replace him with? I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but if you had somebody in mind.
Like, first of all, I think that almost anybody would be better right now. Harris would not be my first choice just because I don't think that she's... it
can't be someone in the administration.
She's too inextricably linked to them to really. I think she could still win. I don't think that's untrue. She'd have to rehab her public persona a bit, but Gretchen Whitmer would be great.
Okay.
Governor of Michigan. Fuck it, Wes Moore. Throw him in there. Why not?
I actually looking into him more and more, I would hate to have him wait. Put him in now. Let him do his thing.
Yeah, I mean, name recognition will be a problem, but that's not an issue when it's a fucking presidential campaign. Like, that gets resolved very quickly.
But imagine he's the only guy in the entire world where I'd go, Wes, here's what I want you to do. I don't want you. I want you to look like just a people person. I don't think everybody needs to look at Donald Trump, right? He's like this. He pretends to be 6'4", but he's like 6'1", and he pretends to be I don't know, probably 200 pounds on his driver's license. Put him and the charismatic person like Wes Moore against each other. Those are debates I want to see. You've got jacked Wes Moore, who's not gonna put up with any shit, because I've watched him speak now, and I'm so impressed by that dude that I'm I would rally for that.
Hell yeah! I mean, I think his military background too. I think, right?
I think so too. And he when he speaks, people listen, and that's what the Democrats
US Army
are missing.
captain, served in Afghanistan. Yeah.
Dude,
good luck, fucking putting him up against. Yeah, that'd be fucking awesome.
Put him against him. That's what you need. That's the guy you need. That's my opinion, obviously. Yeah. But and I don't even know if he'd want to do it, because in all honesty, he would be better off waiting, based off jumping in late, stuff like
45.
that.
45, God, what a dream.
I know, dude. He is, and he's legit. He's the real deal. Obviously, I don't know him personally, but I think he is. I think he is. And I mean, Bashir is still high on my list.
Yeah, I think he'd make a great VP. I think that he might not be the best messenger. I don't know that he's got the right charisma for that. Maybe I'm wrong. I could be wrong. I think he'd be a great VP. I would love to have two people with an accent on the ticket. You throw Whitmer and Bashir there. That'd be real nice.
There we go.
Josh Shapiro, you can make an argument for him, governor of Pennsylvania.
Okay.
Pennsylvania is a critical state. It would be very important. So there's a lot of people that I would consider. I like a governor, though, somebody that's got executive experience that I think knows how to govern a little bit, rather than just somebody that's sat on their ass in the Senate.
That's trying to think who I was thinking of. Hold on. Jason Cantor. That's another guy.
Man, I haven't heard his name.
He's been
in a
out of
long
politics.
time.
Because he's been out of politics. He's walked away from it, from my understanding. But remember when that ad came out of him putting that gun together, blindfolded?
Fuck yeah, it was a great ad.
Imagine him being like, all right, Donald. And plus, Jason could talk. I've met him before, like personally. I know him. Like he's a very nice guy, and he can talk. He can take over a room. Put him against Trump and be like, all right, if you're such a firm believer, why don't you and I go shoot? Why don't we just go shoot together?
I'd love that. I would pay money for that.
Yeah, let's just, we'll film it. Like, why don't we just shoot it together? You know what? How about we put the guns together too? Why don't we just do that? Why don't we just have some fun, Donald?
Come on, Donald.
Like put him in that. And that's the thing is no one will put him in a tough situation, but he'll put others in tough situations. And I think that's where he shines. That's just, I'm being real. He shines doing that. And I think at this time, you need a person who can do it right back. And Joe's just not the guy now.
You're right. No, and he's definitely not. And there's
They're fighting over golf games. They're fighting over their golf games.
I was so embarrassed for our fucking country when that was happening. My God.
They're fighting over the handicap. Like, come on, man.
Most people don't even play golf, let alone know what the fuck a handicap is.
I play golf, and I can't tell you what my handicap is because a handicap score is the dumbest thing in the world. It's like you take your last round, but then you take the top two. I don't know. It's dumb. Bowling's way easier for a handicap. Everyone should bowl. That's the presidential sport. There's a bowling alley in the White House.
There's not a golf course in the White House. That's for sure.
Zero.
And I think that's where we leave this conversation. I think it's a perfect place to leave it. Thank you all for listening. Hell of a beef, hell of an episode. Check us out on Patreon, patreon.com/iPodLatch. Follow us on all the social medias. Check out our wonderful sponsors, and we will be back next week, friends.
Bye-bye.